Shalom, this is Levi Shore. Welcome back to Swing Good Torah. Today we're doing Parsha Noah. He survives the flood with his family. Now I've heard about this for years in yeshiva. I heard about, there was something about like at the Tower of Babel, the big Tower of Babel, they tried to like launch a satellite into space or like a spaceship or something. I just heard these crazy ideas. And then this year in my physics class, one of my students, he brought me the Tifferet Yonatan. It's written by Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz. And I actually saw it. It's on Parsha Noah. It talks about the Tower of Babel and the rocket launcher, the spaceship they were creating. It's tremendous stuff. And it really makes us realize that our view right now of Western history may not be totally, the accurate view of history. Our understanding of history is very biased, and the Torah can really clear up like exactly what is true. There's always amazing issues. Like, just to give you an example, like our understanding of the ancient world is very skewed because, for instance, if you ever go into tunnel tours in Jerusalem near the Kosel, near the Western Wall, you'll see some of these massive stones and just massive tonnage that modern construction equipment cannot lift these stones. But yet this was rebuilt by King Herod, right? It was like who died in the year 0. So just to give you an idea of like 2025 years ago, I don't know exactly when he rebuilt the temple. And then we see like the pyramids in Egypt, just massive stones that cannot be built with today's technology, like Stonehenge. And so our understanding of the ancient world may not be completely accurate right now. And so just to give you an idea, when he lived in the years 1690 to 1764, so right before the Declaration of Independence, the independence of America. In 1736, he was the Dayan of Prague. He didn't become chief rabbi because of the controversy of being accused of a Sabbatean by Rabbi Yaakov Emden. We're not going to go into that right now. In 1741, he became the rabbi of Metz. And in 1750, he became the rabbi of the 3 communities, which were very big back then. I think they're in Germany. So it was Altona, Hamburg, and Wandsbek. Okay, very interesting. So if we look at, like if I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it says that gunpowder was invented in China, and it was first used in warfare in 904. And then the Taoist religion in China, they used it for medicine. And this is what's called the 4 great inventions of China: the compass, the gunpowder, paper making, and printing. So it could be gunpowder, and the knowledge of gunpowder could have been around far longer in the world. So it's very interesting. All right, so we'll go into it. It's a fascinating look on the Parsha, and he asks very interesting questions. He talks about how did people originally get to America. So it's just a lot of really interesting questions he brings up. So he goes where he starts is after Noah and his wife, who Rashi tells us in Parsha Bereshis in Genesis was Naamah. And then they had 3 sons. So this is all the nations, the 70 core nations of the world are descended from Noah's 3 sons. So Shem, and then you get the Asian nations, and then Abraham was from Shem. So then you get the Jewish people. You get Esav's children who go on to found the Roman Empire, and you have Yishmael's children who go on to found Islam, and they're currently like the Arab nations today. And then you have the son Ham, who goes on to found the African nations, and then you have Japheth, who founds the European nations. So all the nations of the world come from Noah. And so after they were saved from the flood, Noah builds a Mizbeach, he builds an altar to Hashem. And then we read this pasuk, and this is the pasuk that the Tifferet Yonatan is commenting on. It says, "Vayarach Hashem es reach hanechoach." So Hashem smells this pleasing aroma. Okay, so what does it mean? This is a great question. What does it mean when the Torah says that Hashem smells like the korbanos, the offerings in the temple, and in their pleasing aroma? Like Hashem's an infinite being. He doesn't need to smell anything. He doesn't need to eat anything. So what does it mean? So what it means is, the definition is usually given that it means when we follow Hashem's ratzon, when we do what Hashem wants, when we follow His Torah, His mitzvos, that's pleasing to Hashem. That's what's called the reach nechoach, because we're following the mitzvahs, the halakha, and that's pleasing to Hashem. So V'yomer Hashem el libo. This is very interesting. So Hashem says to his heart, Lo osif od likalel es adama. I will not add on further to curse the ground. Bi'avor ha'adam, because of man. So we have to see, what does this mean? So the Tifferet Yonatan, he goes on, he says, so hakasiv alibo. What does this mean when it writes, Hashem speaking to his heart? It says that this is not the ratzon of Hashem. It's not the will of Hashem to reveal that he wouldn't destroy the world any further, in order that there be yira, that there be fear of Hashem upon mankind. And mebli liasos ketoavos, that Hashem didn't want the abominations that the generation of the flood that they were doing. And then Chas v'shalom, they would have to bring another flood to the world. Okay, so it's a very interesting question. So Hashem's talking to himself. He's asking this deep philosophical question. Should Hashem announce to the world that he's never going to send another flood? And he does announce it, because he makes a bris, he makes a covenant with Noach, and then he commands Noach in the what's called the Shiva Mitzvos B'nai Noach, the 7 commandments that are given to all mankind. And then the sign that Hashem does is he puts a rainbow in the sky, the keshes. It's very interesting. We look at a rainbow, there's a bracha we can make on the rainbow blessing. We can make on the rainbow. It's like, oh, the rainbow is beautiful. Rainbows are very scary, because rainbow is a sign that Hashem's saying, I should bring a flood to you today. That's how bad the behavior is in the world right now. And the only reason I'm not bringing a flood is because I made this bris, I made this covenant with Noah not to bring another flood. So here Hashem's debating, should he tell people that he's not going to bring another flood, because he's worried they'll go back to this abominable behavior. So what was the bad behavior of the generation of the flood? So 3 main averas, 3 main sins. So shefichus damim, bloodshed, and unfortunately we see that murder is getting very acceptable to people. It's very scary. Like, if it lines up with people's political views, people will accept murder. It's unbelievable. The other one is giloy arayos, like physical immorality. Like, the only physical relations that are appropriate is a husband and a wife in a marriage, and any other kind of physical relation is a toeva. It's not good, because it doesn't bring life into the world. And then finally, avodah zarah. So in the 3rd generation of mankind, Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, after 130 years of divorce, after the incident, let's call it in the Garden of Eden, they were divorced for 130 years. They remarry, and they have Shais, they have Seth, and then we'll see what's very interesting. So it'll be interesting for another video, but all the conflict in the world is really between the children of Shais and the children of Cain. And we'll get into that later. It's an interesting topic. But Hashem's worried that if he announces that he won't destroy the whole world again, then people are like, oh, well, there won't be another flood. We can just go back, to this, averas and this very bad behavior. And that's the discussion. So then, he says, this echoes, this repeats the words of his Rav, and it needs explanation. And this is the explanation of that Hashem makes the bris, he makes the covenant with Noah, he makes this covenant that he will not cut off all life anymore. He won't destroy all flesh, it says in the world, with the waters of a flood. And then we also see it in the explanation of Rav Hagon Tzadok, and he writes in the Baal Akeda, in Parsha Noach, that it's revealed and is known before Kadosh Baruch Hu, before the Holy One, blessed be He, that He will not destroy the world at all anymore. And this is talking to the generation of the flood, because of the fear, because they had fear of Hashem now, there wouldn't be another flood that would come destroy them, and there wouldn't be another flood that would come upon them and destroy the whole world again. And this is known to Hashem, that because it would be impossible to destroy the world further, but this thing is not, he does not want to reveal. So people were terrified after the flood. I mean, if you imagine, only one family survives total destruction of the world. Hashem actually turns off the whole universe. All the stars went out. There was only life in the Teva and the ark, and everything was gone. So they had great fear. People were living in the highest mountains they could live in. And then there actually arose the first king, Nimrod, whose name means we rebel. And he used people's fears. And we've seen this, unfortunately, in modern day politics, especially with COVID. The government will use people's fear in order to control them. And this is how Nimrod got the world to rebel against Hashem after the flood. So Hashem, had this good point, maybe it would have been better not to reveal that he's not going to destroy the world again, because then they won't have the fear not to do any sin. Okay, so then, let's see, it goes on, he says that all this, they say that it's impossible, right, to bring another flood. He says, I will make it into my heart, the desire that I will make a bris, I will make a covenant with mankind, that if I will not destroy the world because of their sins, then there won't be another flood. But if they will sin, like in general, then there will be a flood, which is interesting. Okay, so I don't know, what does that mean? So he's saying all of this is known, that I gave the person Bechira, I'm saying I gave free will to mankind, and each person, he thinks, like, if it's possible to come further into a flood, then I will. He says, if it's possible to come to a flood, then then why would I do, any kind of avera? Why would I do these three really, really horrible sins, like the people that lived in the generation of the flood? Perhaps, maybe just if one of us would do it, like me, and then the whole world would be destroyed again, like in general. So then I would destroy also everything, through the whole population through a flood. All right, so this is the subject now of the Dor Flaga. So this is the generation after the flood, and this is the generation of, why do they build the Tower of Babel? So it says that they wanted to make a tower, a migdal, until the Shemayim. So it says, Ubikshu liasos migdal ad l'shemayim. They wanted to make a tower until the heavens. All right, so what does that mean? They wanted to make a tower, like this huge skyscraper, until the heavens. So this is their understanding. Like, we could look and say, were they just pisayim? Were they just fools? Like, what do you mean you want to build a tower? Like, oh, you're scared of a flood, so you want to build another tower. So if so, they need a foundation of their chachma, of their wisdom, and understanding greater than, it's interesting, he uses the expression, greater than the width of the sphere of the earth. But they judged according to their wisdom of the teva, of nature, so basically their science of the time, that because all the rains fall down, but then the water vapor and the mist goes up from the earth. So they saw that there was a science that when water condenses in the clouds, it falls down. But yet when rain, or before, the clouds not too condensated, mist, like water vapor, will rise up, and we see mist rising up from the ground. So they're studying the way that the climate works. And then they talking about the nature of water itself, that it would form into these ananim, which is like the fluffy cumulus clouds, and from there the water would flow. So they would see how the rainwater worked. So the water would flow from the clouds, and then the water wasn't coming from Shemayim at all. So they made this scientific observation that above the clouds there was no rain, and like when the water turned into water vapor, it would rise up, it would evaporate and rise up. It would accumulate in the clouds. When it was enough condensation, then it would rain down. But they made this observation that there was no rain above the clouds. And this is all to, have some kind of moon launch, which is very interesting. So they already estimated, according to the miracle of vision, that they were not able to accurately measure the clouds that are thick, dense vapor, and it rises from the earth. I guess it says they could do some kind of they could do some kind of scientific observation of it. But they found that the clouds would not rise more than this ancient measure of 5 mil. I forgot exactly. It's not exactly the same measure of a mile. It may be 2 miles to every mil. I forgot exactly. but the clouds wouldn't go past a certain height. And you can see now, like the scientists will say that the weather is in the lowest level of the atmosphere. I believe it's called the troposphere and then the stratosphere. So the weather's in the lowest layer of the atmosphere. And so then if this thin, so they would say this thin vapor, when the water separates, when it evaporates, it rises high up, but it doesn't go past the level of the clouds. So then they would see that it would not go higher than the thick, dense clouds. So there was a certain height where the water coming down would come down from. So therefore, they estimated that they would build a tower greater than the height of the measure of where these clouds were. So to do a rocket launch, a moon launch, you had to be above, right, the weather. So they wanted to build a tower. So what did it mean the tower went up to Shemayim? It had to be above the, where the weather is, above the clouds. Okay, so then it would be impossible then for the rain to come down upon them from this height. So they wanted the tower to be this height. And then they used the Torah used the language of Rosho Bashamayim, like its head, like the head of the tower will be in heaven, but it means, like in this case, like above the clouds. And he says this is a guma, this is exaggeration, and just like what they knew, like scientifically. All right, so then he says they estimated that the sphere of the moon, there would be enough place on the sphere of the moon to live like the sphere of the earth. So they would try to estimate like how big the moon would actually be, how big the earth is, and they see that there was plenty of room to live on the moon. It's very interesting. I mean, this is so they built the tower in the Hebrew year from creation of 1996. What's interesting is in our current calendar, 1996 was the public release of the internet. So you have like Babel and Google. I don't know, it's some interesting connection. That'll be an interesting video to make. Okay, so they estimated that there'll be enough room to live on the moon, and they would find through the malacha, through the knowledge of flying, that they would able. This is very interesting. So they'd able to build some kind of mast that would have a sail, and this would catch the wind. Okay, so how would this work? So one thing they studied is the science of the climate and the evaporation, condensation, and now this was the study of the winds and air pressure and different nature of the winds and the air, the atmosphere itself. So then they said the wind, they study, so wind and air go up from the earth. And their winds also go up from the earth from below. And therefore, it would be possible maybe to build a ship, like for instance, like a ship on, ocean ship in the middle of the ocean that would be that wouldn't go down into the Mabul. And he's going to get a discussion, basically like why did Noah not build a ship? Why did he just build the Teva? Why did he build the ark? So why, so he's answering what did he need for the Mabul to go to the ocean? So he says that if Noah needed to go to the ocean to escape the flood, he would have built a ship and not the Teva. So what the ark actually was, is it was just, if you look at the dimensions in the Parsha in the Torah, it was just a long rectangular box, and it had 3 levels. I think all the waste was on the bottom level, and then the animals, I believe, were on the 2nd level, and then the people were on the 3rd level. And it just floated. So wherever Noah started, my personal theory is that they were on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where the temple was built, because that's where they came out. They came out, I believe, there because of the Mount of Olives is right there. I don't know. There's a whole discussion. Like Adam and Chava, they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and they were on Mount Moriah also when they were kicked out. So it's an interesting discussion. Also, make an interesting video. But he didn't, right? So Hashem didn't command Noah to build a ship. He just said build a teva, just to float in place. And then when the flood's over, it will rest on the mountain, and then it'll be over. So if so, maybe he didn't know like the art of shipbuilding. So there's a big kasha, because Hashem, could have told him, how to build a ship, and he could have commanded him, instead of commanding him to build a teva, Hashem could have commanded him to build a ship, and he didn't. So maybe people didn't know in the ancient world this nature of shipbuilding. So he says that it's believed, people believe that this also goes against the modern history but there was knowledge that the ocean surrounded the entire world and every part of the world, and it was connected through different channels around the land. And then he's saying that there was basically three parts of the world. There's Asia, Africa, and Europe. And then in the second part, which is called the New World, that's where America is. So he's saying, if so, how, he's asking an interesting question. How did people come before the flood to the New World without a ship? So I think he's asking a question when did the world get this knowledge of shipbuilding? Was it really like the European explorers? But if so, why is there people in Australia? Why are there people in the Americas? How did they get there? There must have been, ancient knowledge of shipbuilding. So he says, if you want to say that before the flood, there wasn't any people there. Now, that's a very interesting question. So if there's no people there, then the flood wouldn't need to fall there. Hashem wouldn't need to flood, let's say, North America, where we are now. Hashem wouldn't need to flood it because no one lived there. So if people were living there, though, then the flood would also have to come over America. So did it rain here? Did Hashem open the floodwaters of the deep to flood, Australia, North America, South America? Hashem didn't need to do it if no one lived here. So if no one lived there, he's saying there was no need. So if so, now he's going to say, well, what's the Rebusa? What's the Chiddush? What's the novelty of the Midrash, the Midrashim that say that Eretz Yisrael, that the land of Israel is called Tahor, and it's called Tahor, it has a spiritual purity. And why is it called that? Because the flood never came into Eretz Yisrael, never came into the land of Israel. So then do we want us to say that the New World's also Tahor because the Mabul didn't come there? It says, according to what I wrote, it's good that the flood really did come into the land, which means the land of Israel, with all of its force, and it crushed it until that it's like those wind that there was not wind though going out from the land of Israel. That was the special nature of Eretz Yisrael, that there was no wind coming out of it. And then if there was no wind coming out of it, then Noach wouldn't be able to sail away on a ship anyhow. Even if he built a ship, if Hashem told him to build a ship, there would be no wind coming out, and they would just be stuck there anyhow. But Hashem told him to build a teva, just this floating rectangular box. So if so, he says it wouldn't be possible for Noach to sail in the ship into the ocean if there was no wind. So since the place where he was, that there at the time of the flood, that there was no wind going out. So it would be impossible to sail without wind. So if so, why did I write that the wind goes from the land of Israel from the below to above? So this is fit if there was a machine that was made with the art, with the science of flying. So the wind is blowing the mass, and the wind then lifts the ship above from much higher and higher. So he's saying what would happen is, one way they could get to the moon in this potential moon launch they were trying to do is, he was saying, if they're above, let's say they're above the clouds, so there's no rain that could fall and push them down. So then you just have these air currents and you have this wind that's just going up and up. So you could build a ship that would catch this wind going up, and then you could just keep going all the way until the moon. Okay, so this is part of their scientific knowledge, what he's saying. So then the ship would just keep going up and up, and then they wouldn't, he's saying they wouldn't live further in the land. They would only, he said, I think they would only live in the land by the reason that there's this dense, strong air that's close to the ground. Okay, so he's saying another problem with trying to get out of the atmosphere would be that close to the ground, right, you have much higher air pressure. That's the highest air pressure on the surface of the earth. And another reason for the tower, he's saying they wanted to get to the lower air pressure. As you go up higher and higher in the atmosphere, you don't have this dense, strong air pushing you back down. So he says, like, this air weighs something down and it can drive it down to the ground. So he's saying that therefore they traveled. I didn't think I found a definition for this word. It's called in shaner. So I don't know if he was referring to like a spaceship or an airship or like some kind of rocket. It sounds like some kind of rocket here because it's very interesting. So he's saying this high-end shiner that works through, he calls it explosive powder. So he's talking about gunpowder, and it's called pilaver. And I looked it up, so there's a word, Scheib pulver, which is, I think, German for gunpowder. And then the force of this explosive powder, it's put into a tube, and then like I think he's discussing a cannon, how a cannon works here, and then it has an explosion, and then a ball explodes out of it that they put into it, and then the ball goes up and up and up until it reaches whatever place they want to go. So I get where he's saying, I think they did some kind of test with shooting some kind of like artillery or cannonball up. And then it said like it never came back down to the earth. So I mean, modern science will say it has enough escape velocity, so it broke out of the atmosphere. And so they did some kind of test of their rocket or whatever they were doing, and it never came back down. So they didn't find like the sphere again on the earth. So they did a test and they saw that it just kept going up. So then according to the Teva, the nature, it only comes back down. It should come back down like the shortest path. So it should fall straight back down. So because they didn't observe it coming back down, they thought that the ball had reached some kind of escape velocity to break out of the atmosphere. So because of this, they judged that the ball went up initially into the dense and turbulent air, but through the force of the gunpowder, it was able to go up high enough where this would not prevent it, and so it broke through like the higher air pressure, and then it got into the lower air pressure, and it was able to escape the atmosphere. So if so, it should be possible to build like something, so anything flying above higher than this dense air would be able to go into like the lighter winds, and then they could ride those lighter winds up, the lower air pressure winds up until the sphere of the moon. So this would keep lifting them, always going higher and higher, and the wind itself was very strong. So I'm not exactly sure what Rabbi Eibeshitz is saying here, the Tifferet Yonatan. I mean, in one way he's talking about like gunpowder and some kind of rocket, and the other way he's talking about like riding the air currents up once you get high enough into the atmosphere. So I'm not exactly sure what kind of ship he was talking about. But then he says that they knew how to like make the ship to go to the sphere of the moon, but the main thing is that they wanted the ship to go above like the turbulent air lower to the ground. And this was the intention of the Dor of the Flaga, this is the generation of the Tower of Babel. And so they wanted to make like some kind of habitation on the sphere of the moon. And there they would be saved from the flood. So they considered to make this ship, but since they would need the ship to get above the turbulent air, like close to the surface of the earth. So they considered to build a tower like high enough that it would be above this dense air, and then from there they would be able to make a ship that could sail the air until the sphere of the moon. So furthermore, the Dor of the Flaga, there was different groups. So like this is one group's reason why they wanted to build the tower, and they knew that from Shemayim until the earth, that it was filled all with air and filled with winds, and they didn't consider that there was any empty space from the earth until the moon. So there would be no vacuum. So they didn't consider there was any vacuum in space. And then there was and he says also there's no limit to their understanding and wisdom to be able to build this. Let me see, he's talking about, so I think he's saying that they estimate that there's no vacuum in space. So they would have winds to ride all the way up to the moon. And that this was, let's see. This is interesting. So then he says there's different types of winds. So he's saying that there's winds that are closer to the earth. These are thicker and denser, and he describes them as ra'im, like spiritually evil, which is interesting. And then the winds closer to Shemayim, so at the top of the atmosphere, the winds are lighter, they're spiritually pure and good. It's a very interesting description. And because of this, the Dor HaMabul, the generation of the flood, that they came before the flood, and they would actually they would burn incense to these winds. So before the flood, they were doing some kind of idol worship to the winds. And they would attach themselves through their actions, like through this idol worship of Avodah Zarah, to like the nature of the winds. And then they were actually disappointed when the winds didn't save them from the flood. But the generation of the Dor HaFlaga, the generation of the Tower of Babel, they saw the illusion and the lies because they judged the winds, that they judged that these winds were closer to the earth and there wasn't any power, force, and understanding in them, and they considered to build a tower higher, much higher than, I guess, like the winds near the earth. And then from there, the winds would be more tahor, spiritually pure. And if they would burn incense and do according to their desires, because of a strong force. But in truth, in Amos he says that the generation of the dispersion, that they were different groups, and this is what one group considered. And it says another group they considered like the Midrash, and it says Vayihi Kol Sefas Achas. So they all had one language, like they all agreed to build the tower, they all had the same idea. All of them agreed in one agreement to build the tower. But there was different there's things they were united about, but they each had different reasons for doing it. So they were all united in building the tower, but different groups had different reasons for doing it. And then he said they knew that they were afraid from the flood, and like Bilam, he told them, I don't know. So Bilam came much later, but here the Tifferet Yonatan, he's quoting Bilam. So Bilam said he was like going like a rechil, like a gossiper, to reveal the secrets of the Kadosh Baruch Hu to the nations of the world, and also to them was a klala, was this curse that they considered because they they kind of like they took upon themselves different things because they were afraid of another flood. But Bilam said to them that the Kadosh Baruch Hu already swore that he would not bring another flood to the world, and then through this they returned to like their wicked behavior. So therefore, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy and Blessed be He, this is why he said in his heart that he was considering not making it public in order that there would still be the fear of the flood. So Hashem saw that there's something good to the fear of the flood. But I think what the Tifferet Yonatan is, so the year of Shemayim can be good. So if people have fear of Hashem's punishment, they'll follow the Torah, they'll do the mitzvahs, and they won't, so rapidly do like an avera, like a sin, chas v'shalom. I think that's a big danger of the times we live in. There's this secularism in the West, this atheism, and a lot of people pretend that Hashem doesn't exist at all, that there's no Torah, there's no mitzvahs they have to follow. And then the behavior gets horrible, and we see like the world falling more and more into these three main averas. So Hashem was like he was debating philosophically, like should he reveal that he's never going to send a major flood? But we do still see like there's destructive like hurricanes and typhoons, and it can be very powerful storm winds. So on a limited basis, like Hashem will use the weather as din, as judgment and punishment, and that way to get people's behavior better. But I think what the Tifferet Yonatan was showing is that still the fear of the flood gave them this, it motivated them, not to listen to Hashem, but it motivated them to do this moon launch to try to live on the moon. And then I assume then they want to go back to their bad behavior, build some kind of pre-flood civilization, on the moon. And so it's interesting. So I mean, it's interesting philosophical question of like exactly what is NASA and all these space agencies. I mean, this would be an interesting video. Like, what is their intention? Like, why? What is this space race or this desire to colonize the moon and different planets? Where is that coming from? And then there's a question I think I want to do another video about is, how far has man like actually been into space or not? So that's a great question. All right, so hope you enjoyed it. It's very interesting. Please share your comments, like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I hope to see you back again soon on Sweet and Good Torah.